You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network. This is the Thunderquack Podcast, the official podcast of Thunderquack Podcast Network, where anything can happen. So strap yourselves in and hold on to your butts. It's Thunderquack time!
Hello and welcome back to the Thunderquack Podcast, the official podcast of thunderquack.com, which you can get early every Tuesday over at patreon.com/thunderquack. Just like our Patreon supporters, Brian Morawski and JJ Samuel, Patreon producers, sorry, I should say, like they do, or you can wait and get it late every Friday on podcast services across the galaxy. I am one of your hosts, Michael Cohen, and with me on this one, Amanda is still in the midst of her Crazy Eights production schedule or whatever. So she's got this week off as well. So I got Kurtis Findlay coming in. How's it going, Kurtis?
Do you want the real answer or just the fake answer?
I just want the short, sweet, let's get into the episode answer.
Okay, but life is busy, but that's probably the same for everybody. Let's get on with the episode.
Yeah, if you want the full understanding of that intro, then you got to go over to patreon.com/thunderquack and pay for the extended cut for the uncut version.
That's right.
And then you'll understand what we're talking about.
Otherwise, it's just an in-joke to us.
Yeah. Kurtis, thank you for subbing in for Amanda, especially on short notice. I had somebody else that I was hoping I could line up, but it fell through at the last minute. So, thankfully I've got guys like you, that I can just kind of go like, hey, are you free on a Monday night? Who's not free on a Monday night these days? But
yeah, no kidding. Well, and it's not my turn to put my youngest to bed, so I have some time to to do this.
There we go. Awesome. We have like an actual subject that we're gonna get into in a little bit, but before we do, we'll just kind of touch on a couple of things. Obviously the Snyder Cut just came out of Justice League. And maybe some of you are interested to hear what I have to say about it, knowing that I am a big Superman and DC fan. But we're going to wait until Amanda is back because obviously she will also have a lot to say about it.
Mm-hmm. And I have nothing to say about it.
Yeah, and Kurtis could kind of care less, I think, or couldn't care less, I suppose.
Couldn't. Yeah. I'm pretty ambivalent toward that movie in general, so I don't know that I'll make I won't go out of my way to watch it.
Yeah, sure. And I would say so. What I will say to that is you're totally justified in having that position, but I will say it is a much better movie than the Joss Whedon version.
But is it a good movie or is it a much better than that other bad movie?
You know what? It's not a movie. That's the thing. It's not even a movie. It is. What I've been saying is that it's like a cinematic opera, right? Which kind of fits with the length of it being 4 hours,
for sure,
and
definitely
broken into pieces. You're gonna need an intermission at some point during this. Like you're gonna need to step away from it and go to the washroom, refill your drink, whatever. But it is almost like it. It doesn't follow a 3-act structure. It doesn't. It's not traditional. So it's really hard to compare because it is very much apples to oranges. But is it a worthwhile DC story? I think so.
Okay.
It is certainly a continuation of Batman v Superman directly and therefore also Man of Steel a little bit more indirectly. I think that the tonal shift from Man of Steel to Batman v Superman is jarring for me. Like I think Man of Steel had a very good thing going for it, and then BVS like threw a lot of that away in favor of shoehorning Batman into this world and getting going with a shared universe, and trying to skip a lot of the steps to earning that. Justice League continues to do the same thing. The difference is that, we've had a long time to live with these characters now. The fact that we have two Wonder Woman movies and an Aquaman movie uh, under our belt, it's like Aquaman is probably the character who is sort of serviced the least by Justice League, but it doesn't really matter because he has his own movie, and that movie is much better than Justice League. Still not a great film by my standard, but much better than Justice League, much better than either version. Aquaman is fun. Aquaman has some really cool stuff in it. It also is pretty obnoxious at times, and very confused as to what type of movie it is. But that's the DCEU in a nutshell.
My boys tried watching that one and got bored, so they gave up.
Oh, I can imagine. For my money, the two best DCEU movies are Birds of Prey and Shazam. Which, if you haven't watched Birds of Prey,
I haven't watched Birds of Prey, but
you gotta watch Birds of Prey. You gotta get on that. Birds of Prey is actually a great movie. Not a good comic book movie. Like, no qualifiers here. Birds of Prey is a fantastic film, full stop. It is also awesome that it happens to be about Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey Huntress and Black Canary and like the whole crew of them, right?
Right.
It's a great movie. It is a great movie. It's actually one of my favorite movies from last year. I mean, like, it's funny because we didn't really end up getting a lot of movies last year, but the last two that I saw in theaters were my two favorite movies of the year. And that's Sonic and Birds of Prey, right?
I watched Sonic just recently, a couple of weeks ago with my boys.
For the first time?
For the first time.
Wow.
I like you said, it was in theaters before. I was never really jazzed to see it. I'm not a huge Sonic fan like you are.
Yeah.
So I just passed it up, and then the pandemic hit, and then it took a long time. I guess it came to Amazon Prime, and it just I just never bothered. But the boys saw that it was there, so we watched it, and it was good. It was a lot of fun. It wasn't anything mind blowing. It kind of was
it's a kids movie,
by the numbers kind of a movie, but it was fun. And
it
Milo loved it so much that he watched it like 8 times in the next week and a half or something like that.
Yeah,
he loved it.
And how old is Milo now?
He's 9.
Yeah, exactly. And that 9-year-old in me that is a huge Sonic fan feels exactly the same way that he does. like that that makes perfect sense to me, because like that's exactly like that. Like, the Sonic movie is exactly the movie that would have been a home run with me when I became a Sonic fan, right?
Oh, for sure.
And like, is it a perfect movie? No, it's not a perfect movie. Is it a perfect Sonic movie? I don't even know if it's that. Like, there's some weird stuff in it, and some.
It's not because he goes to the human world.
Yeah, I mean, like, it does that classic 90s thing, right? Where you have to have your CG character go share the screen with a recognizable human face, rather than just actually making a movie about that character. But here's the thing: if they had tried to make a Sonic movie that was just like jumping right into Robotnik has a giant machine and like just like a CG, like animated Sonic movie, the story would have been garbage. It would have been incomprehensible, and it would have completely lacked anything of any meaning or like sort of any actual like connection. So that wouldn't have worked anyways, right? And that's what a lot of people who complain about it and be like, well, it's not the Sonic movie that we actually want. And it's like, what is that? Because not a single Sonic the Hedgehog video game has a comprehensible, good storyline.
Yeah.
Like the first 4 Sonic games, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, and Sonic and Knuckles, have a storyline throughout the 4 games, 3.5, because technically Sonic and Knuckles was supposed to be part of Sonic 3, but
That's a whole other story.
Yeah, we don't need to get into that. But like the story, that's why I get confused. Where like when I talk about it, I talk about it like it's a trilogy, but it's actually 4 games.
But that wasn't the focus of video games in the 80s and the
No,
early
it
90s.
was, you just were propelled forward, right? It was
Yeah.
just stop Robotnik, right?
Yeah, totally.
So like could you take that story and could you adapt it into something really, really cool? I think you probably could.
We absolutely
I
can. The cartoon, the Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah, I'm really. Have you watched the Saturday morning cartoon recently? It's all on Amazon Prime, by the way.
Yeah,
Uh,
I haven't watched it recently. I watched it many years ago.
yeah, it's you know what? It's better in our memories, I think,
Oh,
than it
okay.
is in reality. It's very much a stock Saturday morning cartoon show,
But I
to a
love
certain
those.
degree.
That's why I
But
had an 80s cartoon night at the comic book stores because I
yeah,
love those
this is
stock
true.
kind of cartoons.
This is true. But yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of 30-year-old adult men who want a Sonic the Hedgehog movie that is like gritty and real and mature, and it's like that you're never going to get that, and if you did, it wouldn't be good. So what we got, and a lot of people have said this, is I'm not unique in this sentiment, but what we got is the best possible Sonic the Hedgehog movie that
Yeah,
you could make.
you're probably
like
right.
it like it like I love the characters, I love the world that they set up. We got Jim Carrey as Robotnik. Like now I say all of this, and as you said, like, I'm a huge Sonic fan. I am currently wearing a Sonic the Hedgehog t-shirt, and
Yeah,
there's a Sonic the Hedgehog Funko Pop, and I don't have a lot of Funko Pops, but I do have a Sonic the Hedgehog one.
right.
Like, he's sitting on my desk staring at me as we have this conversation. So like, I am definitely one of those 30-year-old men who cares way more about Sonic than he should. But I but also, like, fact, I would not be sitting here having this conversation if it weren't for Sonic the Hedgehog as a character. He is in that geek pantheon for me of like, that's the first comic book that I collected was Sonic. So it's
Totally. Do you still?
no, I stopped at, so there's a story to this. So I got the first issue of Sonic, and then I missed the second issue, and I was never able to find a copy of Sonic number 2 because nobody was collecting it, right? Like, I'm
Right.
sure, like, if I really, really looked now, I could find one, but it is like that glaring hole in my collection, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I collected everything from that point forward. I got every single issue, um, and I stopped at 222. That was the decision that I made because I wasn't reading them anymore. I was just buying them and putting them into a box. Just as like, I've been collecting these for 15 years or however long it had been. And it was just like, I can't stop now. Like, what am I gonna do? So I just kept buying them and buying them and buying them, even though I wasn't reading them because they weren't very good.
Yeah.
And so I made the decision at a certain point of like, I got to stop. I have to stop. And it was around issue 200, and I was like, should I stop at 200? And I was like, well, I'm missing number 2, so I'm gonna stop at 222,
222.
which like is totally like arbitrary and just a silly sort of thing. But
It's
that's where I stopped.
poetic.
And then a few years ago, Archie lost the license to it,
Right.
and so they stopped making them. But
Well, you should have at
IDW
least
is,
collected to the end of Archie.
I know, right? Had I known that Archie Adventure Comics was gonna lose, Archie Adventure label doesn't even exist anymore. But like, had I known that they were gonna lose that, I probably would have kept going. But
What number
um,
did they stop at?
I don't know. I think they made it to 300 and something. I think like
Oh,
350
okay.
or
So
something like that.
there's a lot more.
There
That
was a
could be a
lot
fun
more.
project for
It
you.
it went on for a few more years, but I don't care. I'm at the point now where I'm like, do I even need to keep all of the stuff that I've got, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm really
Right.
looking at my collection and going like, these are just boxes. They're not, I don't look at them. I don't pull stuff out, right? Like, it's yeah, I don't know.
I'm in
It
that
it
process too. You know what I actually did the other day? Um, is I took I did a bunch of research. I've looked at a lot of tutorials on YouTube about bookbinding, and this has been something
Yeah.
that's fascinated me because I'm in part of a Facebook group that is that it's just called it's just about people who bind comic books, and because they have these massive collections, and it's like they're just sitting in boxes. I'd rather have it on my bookshelf rather than having to, pull the box out of wherever it happens to be hiding. I've shoved it in a closet or something, and then I have to open it up and find the issue I want and take it out of the plastic and then read 20 pages. And if I want to read the next one, I got to put it back in the plastic, pull the next one up, pull the next one out of the plastic, and read 20 more pages and keep doing that. I'd rather just pull it off of my shelf and read it. And so a lot of people are now getting into this habit of binding their comics. You can either send it to a bindery to do it professionally, or a lot of people are learning how to do it themselves. I'm like, this is quite interesting. So the other day, I found in my boxes, I have a 9 issue series, a very obscure series that Marvel did in the 80s. That I was like, if I screw this up big time, it's not going to be the end of the world. I don't really care about this series, so I tried it, and I actually really enjoyed the process of like stitching it all together, like actually sewing with a needle to put these issues together, and and then I tried making the hardcover backing, except I didn't cut my paper the right, or the cardboard for the covers the right way. So I messed it all up. So I have to redo the cover. But um, now I have all of these boxes of comics. I'm thinking, here's a nice little hobby for me while I'm watching TV in the evenings or something. I can make my own books and put them all on my bookshelf and get them out of my closets.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's certainly because my first, I would say probably the first 100 issues of my Sonic comics are not in great condition because I was a kid. I didn't know what to do, right?
Right. There's no resale value there.
Yeah, and it was the early to mid '90s, and bags and boards were like, what? Like
Yeah,
collectors definitely
exactly.
knew what that was, but like if you just walked into a comic shop, like they didn't bag and board all of their comics
Yeah.
at that time, right? That's not something that happened until I think probably like the last 10 years, where you walk in and like
Right.
everything's been bagged and boarded already. And you're paying an extra 25 cents on the cover price, sort of thing. I But at a certain point, obviously, everything's bagged and boarded and nicely collected. But yeah, a lot of them are in really, really rough condition.
That makes it
And
perfect quality for binds then, because you don't feel like you're ruining mint condition
yeah,
comic books or whatever.
yeah. So I don't know. Maybe when let me know when you run out.
I won't run out for years. I've got
Yeah,
so
in
many
a
comic
few
books.
years when you run out, let me know, and I'll pay
I'll,
you to
I'll
do
do
some
some
of mine.
custom binds.
Yeah.
You can design some really nice covers. You'd have a ball with that, designing some awesome covers to go
Yes.
on them.
That would be the best part of it. That's a lot like I my Star Wars movies and stuff. It's like everything's in like, especially now, they're all in like these weird shaped packages and stuff like that, and it's just like it doesn't all match up. I hate the box set from man, when is that, like 2012, 2013, the
Yeah,
first Blu-ray set that they did. i
yeah, yeah.
hate I hate the artwork. I hate the stupid little like book fold thing that it's in, because they don't snap in, right? They're in like the stupid little sleeves, which
Right.
in my opinion, like they're just
It's
gonna
gonna
get
ruin it.
damaged.
Yep. Scratched
um
up.
and so I look at that and I'm often like, man, like I should just design
You should. Yeah.
my own boxes so that like I can have 1 to 9 all, like all in the same style. um
You could take it a step further than that and incorporate Clone Wars
and
and
Rebels and
Rebels,
everything.
and yeah,
Yeah.
and just have everything totally uniform. Like that would be beautiful.
Yeah. But I think that, and then it's like I start looking at like sourcing files. I've started this project like 3 or 4 times. What I
Oh yeah.
want, I need to find somebody who's good at 3D modeling, who can do all of the planets for me, because what I want to do is black covers with and then redo all of the logos from 1 to 9, all in one style, and not one style, like not pick one of the styles and then do that. As much as I love the special edition, the or not the special edition, the THX versions from 95.
Yeah.
That those are probably like, that's probably my favorite look for the boxes, where it's got they're black, and then each one has like a face, and then a little like montage scene, and then
Right.
the titles are in blue, purple, and red. And they're all kind of like they're all in the Star Wars font, but they're all sort of like individualized, like they have their own sort of word mark. I love that, and it would be cool to do 1 through 3, and then 7, 8, 9 in that style as well. But what I want to do is I want to take influences from all 3 eras of Star Wars graphic design and meld them together into one logo, because 4 through 9 don't have the episode titles on the box art, right? Like they're like 4, 5, 6 are just Star Wars: A New Hope, Empire
Yeah.
Strikes Back,
Right.
Return of the Jedi, right? And then the 7, 8, 9 all use the split Star Wars with the title in the middle, right? And then 1 through 3 all use the font is called Trajan, and they all have the little Star Wars at the top, and then episode whatever, and then the subtitle, like whatever the title of the movie is, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, in smaller font underneath, right? So what I want to do is basically have like the Star Wars logo, like the classic Star Wars logo, and then the Trajan episode number right next to it, like at the same height.
Yep.
And then a THX version, like style logo word mark for each of the titles. So like a nice like word art stylized version for each one. And do them just in white, like they're just white on black. And then at the bottom, like that would basically be like the top third of the box of like the cover, and then the bottom third would be the whatever planet, like like I would just pick a planet from each movie, like that I think is like the most iconic planet sort of for that movie. And try and have some distinguishing stuff, because obviously when we get into the sequels, all of a sudden we have Jakku and Pisana, which are both desert planets again. And it's like, oh, just go back to Tatooine, whatever.
No kidding.
But yeah, so it would be like, I would do like probably Naboo for either Naboo or Coruscant for Phantom Menace. I would definitely do Camino for Attack of the Clones, and then either Coruscant at War for Revenge of the Sith, or Mustafar. Mustafar is probably the more iconic way to go.
I would say Mustafar for sure.
Yeah, and then Tatooine for A New Hope. The original trilogy is easy. Tatooine for A New Hope.
Yep.
Hoth for Empire, and
Yep.
Endor for Jedi.
Yep.
But then when you get into the sequel trilogy, it's really hard, because I don't feel like they're quite as distinct. But I'm thinking I would probably go like Starkiller Base for
Oh yeah.
The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
And then I guess it would be Crate for
Last Jedi.
for The Last Jedi, because you get that white and red, right?
Totally.
And then for Rise of Skywalker, I don't even know, because you're not going to do Pisana, because Pisana is just another desert planet, so it's going to look like Tatooine. I'm not going to do.
What planet is Luke on?
He's on Octo. That's not a bad idea, actually. Octo would be pretty good, because it's all water with the islands.
Yeah, you'd get
That's
a different color for sure than the other.
That's pretty good. It doesn't feature
movies
heavily in the movie, but like Exegol, like we don't even really get a good shot of Exegol as a planet, and well, it would just be blue. It would be like blue clouds. Like I don't even know. Yeah, so like that's sort of always been my plan. for them, and then to have like nice spines that are all the same with the planet there. But I can't find high res art that's all the same
Yeah.
quality level
Right.
to do the planets. So that's always because I want, like, when I say the planet, like, I don't mean like the whole planet would be at the bottom. It would be like the horizon sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Because to me, one of the most iconic things in Star Wars is that first pan down.
Right. Of course.
To
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
like with the ships, and then we see Tatooine and like all that, and then in Empire we see Hoth, and like it's all like that's such a thematic thing in Star Wars that you would have like the logo in space above a planet, and that would be like the perfect cover to do. But yeah, it's just always been, so I don't know, I guess I'm putting that all out there so that somebody who listens can be like, I can do that, and then hit me up, and then we'll do that. We do those as like Thunderquack. There's got to be somebody. We've got a few hundred listeners of the podcast.
Isn't there a book planets that like with all the planets?
but nothing that's up to date. Nothing that's also got
with the new trilogy?
Planets from the sequels, right?
It's got to be coming soon.
The problem is that the three eras have been treated so differently with marketing, right? Like the original trilogy has just such a mishmash of different things, and then in the prequels, there's a lot of good stuff, and as like the visual dictionaries probably would have what I'm looking for,
right?
But I would have to like get the visual dictionaries, and then I would have to scan them, and then I'd have to clean them up, and like it would be like just this whole thing. Maybe the visual dictionaries from now.
Are you looking for it right now?
Wait, I'm just grabbing it to see, like, let's see what planets are in here.
Because if you just made it an ongoing project to do a little bit of like that, sure, use the visual dictionaries, scan them in.
The thing now is that like physical media, what?
Like, right.
Like I'm at the point where, see, this is the problem with the visual dictionaries, is that like I would have to do a bunch of photoshopping to get rid, because they have like the little like call outs sitting on top of the planet.
Oh yeah.
So like I'm looking at Agent Kloss right now, and it's like there's the planet. It's a high res 3D render of the planet. What I need is somebody who works at Lucasfilm to hit me up, because here's Mustafar, and it's exactly what I need for my plan for this plan. But it is like, it's got like all these little call outs all over it that I would have to Photoshop off of it. Mustafar I could actually probably do. It's not that bad. It's which like
if you just want the horizon though, right? You don't need to Photoshop that much. I mean, I haven't seen. I don't know what you're looking at, so maybe it's really bad, but I don't know.
Maybe I can do it just with these visual dictionaries, because.
And then you just put a color filter over something, and then all of a sudden it's another planet. There you go.
That is absolutely true. Yeah, Starkiller Base and Hoth are almost exactly the same. Pisana and Tatooine, not that different. I've got Pisana right here. Maybe I could just use these.
Perfect.
No, somebody, it's not even at Lucasfilm. Somebody at DK Publishing just needs to whoever put this book together, whoever had Kijimi was the planet that I was trying to think of the name of, which is like the weird planet with the little village that they go to that gets blown up.
Right. Yeah.
That's a planet in Rise of Skywalker. What an awful movie this is. It's just, it breaks my heart every time.
There is so I just Googled Kijimi, and there are a bunch of photos or like pictures that people have made of this planet.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're official or not, but
probably
I'm sure you
not
can find
official,
something.
But
official enough for your DVD cover or your Blu-ray covers.
I've started on this project. I've started on this project a few times, and so like I've definitely begun the process of. In fact, I think I even have like a thing in my Google Drive for it.
Man, this is something you need to blog about or something.
Yeah,
just this whole process of you making these covers. It'll also keep you accountable to actually finish it.
Theoretically. theoretically.
I think you should. I want you to do it, Mike.
Yeah.
I want to see the finished product, and I want you to incorporate Clone Wars and all of those shows, Rebels and everything.
Yeah, it is something that I should do just as like a portfolio project of like a hey Lucasfilm, the next time you guys need to do one of these. Yeah, here
Well,
it is
yeah.
in my Google Drive, Star Wars Blu-rays. I've got Source. What do I have here? What do I got here?
Do what you need to do in order to justify making it happen.
What is this PDF that's in here? Oh, this is accidentally saved in here. That shouldn't be in there. Interesting. What was my thought process here? Oh, I'll tell you what I was doing here. I have a very high res screen cap from the Phantom Menace of the moment when the battle droids all unfold, like right
Yeah.
at the beginning of the Battle of Naboo. And it's got that perfect shot centered on one of the battle droid heads just as it's popped up. Because I was gonna try and do the special the THX versions, and
Oh,
the
okay.
the
Yeah,
helmet
yeah.
for the Phantom Menace was gonna be just that. It was gonna be the battle
Nice.
droid. But
Now you're
anyways,
going in a different direction.
yeah. Now I'm going in a different direction. Yeah, and then I get to write blurbs for the back of the DVD boxes. Like,
Fun.
I
And
don't
put
want to
your
do it
own.
just
You
as
could put your own
slipcovers, right?
star rating on the back of each one.
Yeah. I was just gonna put the Thunderquack logo there next to Lucasfilm, right? Like Lucasfilm Thunderquack.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyways, these are the ridiculous things that you and I do with our spare time.
Oh man, it's so fun. I love it.
But let's jump into the topic that you wanted to talk about, because I think that we got some good meat on the bones of this one.
Yeah,
I'll
you
let you
asked
intro
me.
it.
Yeah,
You intro into it.
you said I asked you what are we going to talk about, and you said I don't know. You pick something, whatever you
Yeah.
want. You said whatever you want. I'm like whatever I want.
Anytime I ask Amanda if I'm calling her out right now. She's not going to listen. Maybe she will. Sometimes she listens when she's not on. I'm calling her out though. Every time that I'm like, "Hey, do you have anything for the show this week?" Always no. Always. Every once in a while. Once every like 5 episodes, she's like, "I think I got something." That I mean, like most of the time we kind of already, like next week we know we're just going to talk about Justice League, but when on the weeks where we don't have anything, it's like, "Hey, you got something for me?" And it's always no. On the
Well,
weeks
it's
where
like
there's
yeah,
nothing,
and like what do
it's
we?
always no.
I'm
So
so I'm
I
thinking
was like,
about
I'm gonna
this.
make
Yeah.
Curtis make it.
Thanks. But I can understand though because it's like, what do we talk about? Like you and I talk about a lot of stuff, but we
Yeah,
don't talk about a lot of stuff that isn't already covered on one of your various podcasts, right? It's like I don't know. We could talk about the Marvel TV shows, or we could talk about Star Wars, or something. I don't know. You definitely don't want to talk about Arrow stuff anymore, but it's like um what am I going to talk about? So the thing that popped into my head, and it's something that is relevant for this day and age, and what society's kind of going through right now. It's this whole concept of the censoring of old material. And so recently, so there's a couple of ways that this relates to me. Stuff that I see in the news or come across my Facebook feed or stuff, and then stuff that I'm working on with my comic book work with the Library of American Comics. And so we can get into both of this. But the thing that kind of happened, which is the big news recently, is that the Dr. Seuss estate, the Theodore Geisel estate, has said that they are going to cease publications of 6 of their books, of their
yeah,
long-standing books, because of some racial depictions that are found within. And the some of the cartoon forums or comic forums or whatever that I'm a part of on Facebook here, they just kind of exploded with how dare they, and it's all this kind of stuff. It's like, why are they going to do this? And then I see like on Facebook Marketplace, all of a sudden like one of those books is selling for $200 and like all
yeah.
this kind of stuff. But like, so my question here is, do they really need to stop publishing? Does it matter that they stop publishing it? What kind of difference is that going to make? Like, what is the purpose behind here, and I come at it from a historical, like from a historian perspective,
Mhm.
because it's like these are books that were written 75 years ago, almost, some of them. I think Mulberry Street is the oldest one out of that lot, and it was written, I can't remember the exact date, but I think it's early 40s or maybe even late 30s.
Hmm.
And so it's like for the sake of cultural history, um, I don't think that it should be, taken off the market. But here's the thing: is that it's over the last 75 years, or however long this book has been in print, it's printed literally millions upon millions of copies of these books. So the fact that they're not going to print any new copies is really not a big deal at all. You can go to the thrift store and probably find 10 of them.
Yeah.
It's like they're going to still be in all the libraries. They're still going to be in a bunch of classrooms, probably, or whatever. So, I mean, if you want to find them, it's not that hard. The question is accessibility. Who, like at this point, should they be in classrooms if they are portraying racially insensitive caricatures?
Yeah.
And
Well, what?
that's the thing that people
Yeah.
are kind of are skipping over. They're people on the forums are like, they're getting all mad and hot under the collar because they feel like this is censorship. People shouldn't be censored and all this kind of stuff. But it's like, no, we want to be able to teach our kids to think appropriately. And these images, especially if you just throw the book on the table and let them read whatever in
Yeah.
the school library, it's not teaching them anything. In fact, it's enforcing some bad thinking because you're not there to back it up.
But here's the thing. Censorship has nothing to do with this conversation, right?
Right.
Because it's
Yeah.
not censorship.
No, it's
It's
not.
it's the estate of Dr. Seuss.
Yep.
It's his children, right?
Yep.
Or is it children or grandchildren? But
Whoever
whoever
it is, might be
whoever makes
grandchildren
that
by this
call,
point.
whoever's in charge of the estate right now, has decided, as is absolutely their right,
Yeah.
that they're no longer going to publish copies of this. The book hasn't been banned by the government.
Right.
We're not burning copies of it, right? They're not being destroyed.
Nope.
The publisher of the book, the person who holds the rights to those specific stories, has decided that it is not in keeping with their moral compass that they continue to publish these works.
Yeah, it's totally
That
in their
is a
right to do
very
it.
different thing from censorship, which would be something like the publisher or the government coming in and saying, we're no longer going to do this. Now, free market, it is also within the publisher's rights to say there's racist content in these books. Yes, we have published them for the last 70 years. We are no longer going to publish these because that doesn't match our values, right?
Yeah.
That is also totally within their rights as a corporate entity, legally and morally, totally within their rights. It's when the government comes in and says, we don't think that this should exist anymore, that you
Right.
get into sticky territory. Now, it also becomes difficult. I don't know about the specific content in question, but let's say, for example, the a racial term that's been outmoded for a long time has been used, and that would, by today's standard, be considered hate speech, right?
Yeah.
Words that I am not even going to consider uttering on a podcast,
Right.
right? That would have been absolutely part of the vernacular in the 1940s, and
Yeah.
not even the sort of thing that anybody would have batted an eye at, right? If a
Right.
book is published with that kind of language in it, and it's a book intended for an audience under the age of 18, then as adults, it is kind of our job to make sure that's only being encountered in specific scenarios. Do those books have a place in the classroom? Yes, they do. In the right classroom, in the right context, to the
Yeah.
right age group. 7
Well,
year
I think
olds?
about, yeah,
No.
well, high school
16-year olds?
students.
Yeah, let's have a
Yep.
conversation about
Mhm.
this, right?
Well, I think
But
about Huckleberry Finn. Have you ever read Huckleberry Finn?
yes. Yeah.
That one has a lot of that very particular term that should not be said, but it's repeated over and over and over and over again. But it's a culturally and historically important book that is read in English class in high school and such.
Yeah.
And it should. Like, it's still a good book, has good lessons, and it does open that door to talking about, this subject with the students and such. But you have to have that context. That's the important part. So for Dr. Seuss, there are no bad words in these books. They
Mm.
are bad. It's the illustrations that are insensitive depictions.
Yeah.
So Mulberry Street, for instance, has a line about a Chinese person eating rice or whatever, and it's like, the pale yellow skin with the long pointy um, mustache, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And in the book, If I Left the Zoo, there's one creature that was caught in deepest darkest Africa, and so these caricatures of African natives are carrying it in a cage on their shoulders. And it's like, yeah, that's, it's the quote unquote cannibal or whatever, that kind of picture.
Yeah.
Not okay. But my question is, instead of pulling the books from it, why didn't they just create a new version? I think of Hardy Boys. Hardy Boys books have been around for decades and decades. I think they started probably in the 40s as well. And over time, they've changed the language of those books quite a
Hmm.
bit, a number of times, to take out things, to either update the language, to take out the racially insensitive language. And they just published the book again, a new edition with updated language. Why can't Dr. Seuss do that too? Just instead of um, pulling it all together, we just create a new version with, it's just one picture in the book that needs to be changed. I don't think that that's a huge deal.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's definitely an avenue that they could take. Um, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. We're not talking about any of the major Dr. Seuss classics, right? Like
No,
if
no,
Green
green eggs
Eggs
and
and
ham.
Ham had a racist depiction in it, I think that the estate of Dr. Seuss would absolutely be looking at a way to continue publishing that book.
Right,
But it's like when you say Mulberry Shot, like I don't know that one,
right. If
like
Yeah, exactly. There are none of, like, it's not the Grinch, it's not Cat in the Hat. It's
yeah.
these other ones that are lesser known, scrambled egg super or whatever. And it's like, they're great. They are fantastic books. Um, On Beyond Zebra, another one, is one of my favorites, because Dr. Seuss has created a whole alphabet that comes after the letter Z,
Hmm.
and it's just great. But it's got that picture in it that's not that great, so they pulled it. Um, but and actually, to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street as Dr. Seuss's first published kids book, and so that has a historical relevance just in that sense
Yeah.
right there.
But like I put it in a museum. I'm sure there's a copy of it in the Smithsonian, right?
Oh, I'm
Like
sure there is. Yeah,
like when we talk
right.
about historical relevance and significance, that we have institutions for that sort of thing.
Yeah,
And the
yeah,
bookstore is not one of them, right? Like we have to separate a few things. We have to separate the institution of like the library, the archive, right? Like
yeah,
library in terms of where we store our vast human knowledge, right? Not the library where you go and you check out a book. So like, like a museum library, like a Smithsonian or something like that, right? Like there are places for these things. And then we have to talk about the context within our education system. Where does
yeah,
this fit? And how should this be utilized? And then we have to talk about the free market commercial system and how that deals with it. And I think like when we talk about these three different things separately, there's a different approach for each. And take a couple of copies, put them in the Smithsonian, put them in different institutions around the world. So like, hey, we have this historical piece and it's there. And if somebody seeks it out, they can find it. Right. I mean,
yeah.
like if these things are 70 years old, there some of them have to be entering the public domain soon as well, which then we get into a whole other thing of like
Yeah,
nobody owns it, therefore everybody owns it, therefore publish it. like you can't, nobody can stop you from publishing it, right? It's
Right. Yep.
like old I Oswald the rabbit, right? Like that stuff, like you just,
Yep.
nobody can do anything about it now, and that's one of the reasons why it's one of the main reasons why Disney doesn't really go anywhere near that character,
Yeah.
except when there's like an anniversary that they want to celebrate, right? Like they generally leave him alone because they don't technically own him. So, they do
Well, they
something.
own the trademark of him,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
the films themselves are falling into public domain. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, like there's all these like weird, tricky things that start happening where it's like you can start making certain things happen with that content.
Yep.
And so I'm sure that when that happens, that'll happen. They when those enter the public domain, that somebody will. I'm sure that somebody is already planning this. Somebody is already sitting on a pristine copy that they've
Yep.
scanned, and and they're ready and waiting for that day because they'll be able to make a lot of money printing that book. But
Yeah.
um,
Well, the other part of this conversation is the part where we have the mob mentality now of people who
yeah,
find inappropriate content and they jump on it to say, either they say, there's one camp that says this shouldn't ever be seen. We have to do something to make sure that it's never seen again. And then there's the other camp who are like, why are they trying to hide this? This should be for we shouldn't try to change anything or whatever. The Muppet Show just came to Disney Plus, and I
yeah,
love the Muppet Show. And for the longest time, um, 3 seasons were on DVD, and the last 2 seasons were never on DVD because the first 3 seasons didn't sell well, and Marvel and Disney has to spend a ton of money because every song has like 5 songs that they need to license for this new medium or whatever, and
yeah,
it's like ridiculous. But it's all on Disney Plus except for 2 episodes, and for various reasons. One is a music rights issue, and the other is because the guest star is actually not a good person. So they decided to not put that episode on the streaming service, which is fine. A lot of people still have a problem with that, but that's another conversation. But they put a warning if you go to the main menu. It's like, certain episodes have a warning that comes up before the beginning of the episode saying
yeah.
there are some depictions in this episode that are not culturally sensitive, and all this kind of stuff. And I just couldn't believe the hissy fit people had online about the fact that there's like a 3-second disclaimer at the beginning of this episode saying, "Hey, it's here," because it's like, this is what they want. This is what you want. It's uncut.
Yeah.
It's there for you. Why are you complaining now that there's like a little warning in front of it? And they're like, Disney's just being really woke and all of this kind of garbage.
Yeah,
It's like, come on, man.
I watched the Steve Martin episode.
Yes.
And there are, I think, 3 things in the episode that I'm like, I see what you guys are talking about. One of them is a Steve Martin joke, part of his act. I think maybe it's when he's doing the balloons or something like that, or it's right before then. It's the time when he comes out and he comes out to do his act for the guys, because the joke in that episode is that the guest canceled, and so Kermit's like, oh, we can't have a show, or no,
No,
he's like,
no.
oh no,
The stage was under construction, and
it's not,
Steve Martin. They canceled the show, and Steve Martin still showed up to do the show. Right?
No, he's auditioning new acts. That's what it was.
Oh, that's
he's
what it
auditioning
was.
new
Yeah,
acts.
that's
It's like,
right,
oh man,
that's
it's in
right.
my schedule this week. We're auditioning all the new acts. So they send like Steve Martin was supposed to be, I guess, the guest, and they're like, oh, we don't need you this week. You can
Yeah,
go.
they send him away.
And he's
So
like,
he comes
well,
back in disguises.
yeah,
That's
he's
right.
like, I got nothing better to do, so he sticks around, and it's a great episode. It's a fantastic episode of the Muppet Show.
Totally.
But there is a moment where Steve Martin is doing his act, and he makes some comment about Chinese people, and then he does like a little tune,
It's
like a sort of thing.
It's very cringy.
And yeah, and it's like and he kind of makes a face and he kind of does the thing, and you're kind of like, oh boy. And I'm sure that Steve Martin if he were to watch that back, would be like, I really regret doing that.
Yeah,
But
totally.
like, but it's also a thing of like, well, at the time, everyone was okay with it,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
And
every white person was okay with it.
certainly, everyone who had the power to put that on television was fine with it.
Yeah.
And so it went on television, and that was just the way that it was at the time. And I think that I think it is fine for us to, if for Disney to decide like, okay, we're okay with airing this so long as we let people know in advance. And it's not like it comes up in that moment and goes, by the way, this is the thing we were talking about. Right.
Right.
Like it does. There's not like a little warning that comes up on screen and is like, this is racism.
Yeah.
It's like they don't hold your hand through it. They just are asking you to view this older content with a critical eye and to think about it. And I think that that is exactly the right approach.
But is it the right approach for Disney Plus, which is a babysitter for children? Like the mom will just put on Muppet Show on repeat or whatever, and the
Yes,
kids
because
who can't read it.
that's not on Disney, right? Like we're in difficult territory here, but as a parent, I will firmly say that is not on Disney. That's
Right.
on you as a parent
So then,
to
what's
know
the
what your
difference
kids
with?
are watching.
Yeah.
With a Dr. Seuss book, nothing. There's not. I'm not saying that the Seuss family and the publisher shouldn't be able to produce that book. I'm defending their right to say they don't want to anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
For them to
Right.
say like, hey, we're not comfortable doing this. It doesn't match our values. It doesn't match what we know this whole thing stands for.
Yeah.
That is
And you're
within their
yeah.
rights.
And you're saying
They're
Disney can do the same thing.
and I'm saying that if Disney turned around and went, hey, the mushroom sequence in Fantasia, we're going to get rid of that because the mushrooms turn into little Asian people running
Yeah.
around and bumping into each other with their, with like little slits for eyes. And, you know, like the whole, like the mushroom caps are like um, I don't know what those hats are called. Do you know what those hats are called?
No, but I know what you're talking
I
about.
just think of like people like in the field, like you know,
Yeah.
working in the field, right?
Working in the rice. Yeah. The rice
Yeah,
fields.
everybody knows what we're talking about. So they're like running around doing their whole thing, and it's like it's beautifully animated. It's to the music and like whatever, but it is definitely problematic. It's an issue, and if Disney was like, "We're going to remove that," I would be like, "That's a weird choice because you're editing out a single part of Fantasia, but which is it's part of a larger musical sequence." Obviously they looked at that stuff and went, we're not going to do that, right? We're going to present this as it was,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to just put the disclaimer before it, which they do, because I just watched Fantasia, started watching it with the girls the other day, and I right after we watched Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which like we can get into that, which is a whole other thing of like, where does that fall? Because by today's standard, man, like there are out and out masturbation jokes in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, yet there's a ride in Disneyland
Yeah.
for Roger Rabbit, right? Like, so
But yeah, Roger Rabbit is not a kid's. That's why Disney never put it on their own label. It was a Touchstone movie.
Yeah,
They
and
didn't want kids to see it.
I mean, like, look! I watched it with the girls the other week, and like
I
all that
watched it
stuff
with my
goes
boys too.
way over their heads.
Yep.
Obviously, we also watch
Absolutely.
Ghostbusters. We've watched a million things that I think a lot of people would look at and go like, "This is not okay." But if you were
Yeah.
to release that today, I think that there would be a lot of people calling for, you know, I guess now Bob Chapek's head and saying like, "This is unbelievable that you guys would do." And it's like, things change, the world changes. I think sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. The pendulum swings both ways, and you know, right now in the world we're dealing with ultra right wing conservative extremism, and to combat that we have the ridiculous left wing neoliberal conservative neoliberalism
Yep.
that is like the conservatives, it's so funny because it's such a flip from when we were growing up in the 90s, where the conservatives were the ones who were like, this is all inappropriate, censor everything, right? um won't someone think of the children is the classic
Right.
Simpsons joke, right?
Yeah.
uh and now it's the liberal side that's like that's saying, won't someone think of the children? um and so it like it just, we always kind of swing both ways. And then in the 2000s it was somewhere in the middle, where it was perfectly wholesome and okay for Jessica Simpson to be walking around with a pair of jeans that, like barely covered the pubic region, to not put too fine a point on it. But like, everybody listening to this podcast knows exactly what I'm talking about with like low rate. And like I'll do an even more wholesome example. Mandy Moore, who was like the good Christian girl version of all of those pop divas in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And like, it's, you don't have to look hard to find a picture of the area from her belly button to just above what we would consider pornographic. And when I say just above, I mean within a centimeter of just above. And no one was walking around going like with their arms up going like, this is unbelievable. At the time we were just like, that's what jeans look like now. um and and we all just kind of like accepted it, because there was like a weird period in I think in the early 2000s, like I think I would say from like 97 to like 2003, in that weird 6-year period where like no one was upset about anything really. Like it was a weird period when I look back on it and go like, there wasn't like, we were just kind of right in the middle with a lot of stuff. It wasn't, nothing was extreme. And then
Oh yeah, it takes time to get extreme. It started in
um
little ways.
it started in a very big way on September 11th 2001, but it like, and that has pushed us into the extreme right-wing conservative era that we're in right now, because like it was so easy to take it one step by step by step, as a matter of fact leaps and bounds at a certain point, to get us to the point where Republican politics is now, uh, evangelical Christian politics,
Yeah.
and the whole thing is just kind of ridiculous. And the, like I said, like the neoliberal part of that is a reaction to, right. It comes out of like this comes up when we talk about like BLM as well, right. And Antifa and all of that stuff. And it's like, people want to, on the right wing, want to talk about these things as if they are the cause and not a reaction to a systemic issue, right. Antifa, it's right in the name, anti-fascist, is a response to the fact that American politics and government have very, very much swung towards a fascist dictatorship, especially with the last guy. We were knocking on the door of neo-Nazi fascism, and a bunch of Americans are cool with that, and so a bunch of other Americans are like, no, we're not cool
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
funny thing about that is that those Americans that are cool with it are like, you'll pry my guns from my cold dead hand. And then they're like, Second Amendment, it's about us being able to defend ourselves and form a citizen militia against the government if it rises up against us. And then here's Antifa, who's like, the government is literally persecuting people based on the color of their skin, and we're not okay with it, so we're going to form a militia and rise up against that. And they're like, whoa, 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 you guys can't do that. You guys can't do that. Just us. Right. Like it's, so it's just, there's such a failure for people to see either side because they're so far to the extreme. Hopefully that's starting to swing back into the center, and not that
No, I don't know.
centrism is okay by any stretch of the imagination, but like,
Just more reasonable.
yeah, just both sides into a more reasonable place.
It's hard to navigate in between in the in between area. So I mentioned that I work with the Library of American Comics, and right now we're working on um, just the very early stages of new editions of Terry and the Pirates. And
Mm.
this is a comic strip that I made you read a number of years ago
Yeah.
for an old podcast, and I'm sure you can remember the Asian stereotypes in there, because the premise of the whole comic strip is that these two guys go from America to Asia, and they're like, I don't even remember why they're there. But it's just full of Asian stereotypes, because those are the people they live amongst in this comic strip that was done in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
And so we're doing these new editions, and my boss is talking to a couple of different websites to get some, um, you know, early reviews and whatnot, uh, lined up for the launch. And one of them, she says, "Are you sure you want us to publicize this? Because, our we have a very liberal leaning readership, and this is going to go over badly with them." And it's like, but can't we just put it in historical context? No, we can't. These people, our readership doesn't want it to exist.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And it's like, oh, how can we just make? Can't we just make books? And then like we, the thing about these books also is that we do, with our introductions and stuff, we put it in the proper historical context. They are collectors' books. They're expensive. They're not going to get in the hands of kids, but still people don't want it to be made, because we should ignore the stuff that came before, uh, which is not the right response either. Like, we can't just ignore history. um, we need to make sure that history is still around, so that we know where we came from and how we've evolved.
Yeah, and to learn from it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, and I think that that's the conversation that we had on the Pull Box podcast back then, was like,
Yep.
like we have to look at this stuff to know, like, this is where culture was at a certain point. Let's remember this wasn't that long ago, and we'll do better.
It's just interesting though, because when we published the old versions, or when this publisher, I wasn't with them at the time, when they published the old versions 12 years ago, they didn't have a single peep from a person
Yep.
asking about this. And where we're getting this is where we've gotten to the point where, like, this person doesn't want to put it on their website saying, hey, look at this cool new version of this old comic strip, because the reaction from the readers will be, you know brimstone and pitchforks and torches or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough, but I don't know. It's hard to pinpoint what it is, and like where it comes from. I do think that there's cause and effect for all of this, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think one of the biggest things is that the the internet has made it so that we can all talk about this stuff, and we can all find out just how many of us actually don't like something or do like
Right.
something.
Yeah, that's true.
And it allows these groups to mobilize and organize in a way that they couldn't 12 years ago or 20 years ago. Certainly not, before that. So these pockets, it's like in the Star Wars community. There's stuff going on. You're a Star Wars fan. You like Star Wars.
Yeah.
You have no idea that in the Star Wars community right now, there's a battle between the alt-right and people who happen to like the fact that Rey and Kylo Ren kiss at the end of Rise of Skywalker, right?
Oh yeah.
That's new information for you, even though you are someone who would consider themselves a Star Wars fan and has a decent amount of knowledge. If
Yep.
you're not in that community and you're not like actively engaging, then it's really easy to not know that this stuff is happening.
Have
But
you heard of Comicsgate,
well,
Mike?
and like, I mean, these guys are part of comics, like this alt-right group.
Yeah.
They are comic skater. It's Ethan Van Sciver's one of
Oh man. Oh
the
no.
the
He's the
ringleaders
worst.
of this. Um And yeah, exactly. All I have to do is mention the name. It's like he's really got a reputation.
Yeah.
Um, but the average person out there in the world has no idea that this is happening, even though there are thousands of people engaged in this conversation right now,
Yeah.
right? Um, and so when those thousands of people mobilize, like you can end up with good and bad. I mean, like the Snyder Cut's a really great example. Warner Brothers heard that the fans wanted the Snyder Cut. Well, Warner Brothers also didn't pay attention to the fact, and I don't think is fully aware, certainly the executives at Warner Brothers aren't aware, that the people who mobilized that group did it in a very misogynistic, a very like racist, xenophobic way.
Yeah.
In a lot of instances, it the reason why the Snyder Cut happened isn't because of those fans. I think that people need to recognize that the reason that the Snyder Cut happened is because of Ray Fisher and what happened with him.
Yeah.
And him speaking out against Joss Whedon and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. They needed a film that they could promote that didn't have Whedon's name on it.
Warner Brothers needed to do damage control on that, and one
Yeah.
of the main things that they did was say, okay, we're going to release the movie as it was originally intended. We're going to let Zack Snyder finish it,
Yep.
knowing that like Cyborg is a major part of the Snyder Cut, and his stuff was
Oh,
trimmed
so
down
keep
to
Ray
almost
Fisher
nothing.
happy.
It, yeah, I mean, like Ray Fisher isn't stopping with his crusade to make sure that everybody involved with the racism and other garbage that went on the set of Justice League doesn't happen in the future. I mean, like, and it's a fight worth fighting, and I
Yeah,
totally
for sure.
stand with him on that.
Yeah.
And I think that Warner Brothers is still being really dodgy about it, and but I do think that they thought we'll release the Snyder Cut and this will go away. They were wrong, but I think that was part of their thinking, and they did it unaware of the fact that the vast majority of people organizing a lot of the release the Snyder Cut movement are not great people. And it's really funny because what happened over the weekend, or I guess like last week, as they were releasing it, they were doing all of these charity events in the lead up, and one of them was like Zack Snyder did like a Zoom call, as is the like the thing of the moment, to do a charity Zoom call where people pay to be on this Zoom call. Two of the guys that were on it are part of this group called Geeks and Gamers, and this is a YouTube channel or something. I was totally unaware of them until this happened, and I really honestly don't know that much about them. Just that that they've said some pretty awful stuff in recent years, and basically Zack Snyder started off this Zoom call with like, hey, so I just want to say, like basically their name is on, like, Geeks and Gamers is on, like, their logo is part of this chat, or like this charity thing, but I just want everybody to know that we are in no way affiliated with them, and like, we stand against hate and bigotry, and like he had like this whole thing that was very like, it could have been a little bit better, but the fact that he did it in the first place, I think was huge. And these two guys are on, it's a video, it's a Zoom call, and it's recorded, and it was for public consumption, and these two guys are on it, and you can kind of see them like reacting like, uh we're here in the room, and Zack Snyder is like, these guys suck, and we don't agree with them, and what they said sucks. And it's so funny because it's like these guys were a big part of the release the Snyder Cut movement, and then immediately after this happens, there's like video on top of video, just these tirades of them being like, Zack Snyder is garbage, the Snyder Cut is a terrible movie. Like, it's so interesting how quickly they flipped.
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
now
man.
all of a sudden it wasn't serving their narrative anymore,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
Because Batman v Superman really fed into that toxic masculine landscape, and it attracted a lot of those guys. It's just one. I mean, fandom just does in general. That is above my pay grade. I don't understand it fully. I just know that it's happening. And there's a whole thing about the Ethan Van Sciver thing is really tied into this article about how Breitbart and what's his face, the guy that looks like uh, unshaved Jabba the Hutt that was working for Trump years ago.
I don't know.
He knew and he mobilized fandom to radicalize Trump followers, basically, like to create the world that we currently live in. Like they've used social media and the internet in general as this tool to radicalize these people. And the main avenue that they've used to do it has been fandom. And when you couple that with, I believe that they have done this in conjunction with Russia. And this sounds a little bit like a conspiracy theory, but we know there are statistics that back up the fact that like there's a published paper that backs up the fact that Russia was behind the anti Last Jedi movement after that movie came out.
What,
Right?
really?
Yeah, there's a published paper that like the Russian basically the KGB and the Russian like political system, like their whatever system they have that keeps Putin in power and other people who would rather, people have freedom from getting into power. Whatever that system is, like they basically, in order to undermine American politics, used like along with the bots that they were using to radicalize right wing people, they used The Last Jedi as a way to do it, as a way to get people in there. So a lot of the discourse about Rose Tico, about that character specifically, about the movie being like feminist propaganda, all of these things that like these alt-right men's rights nut jobs have latched onto, a lot of it came from Russian bots on Twitter.
Wow.
And like like I said, there's a published paper that supports this. And I think that I personally believe it. Go watch the Comey Rule, which is on HBO. I which is one of the things that I've watched on HBO that like where like they see that this was happening, that Russia was using Twitter and using bots to basically like make it look like there were more of these people than there are. Basically, like they've taken advantage of niche like subcultures within the internet to further push people into these radical positions or manipulate people into the beliefs that they need them to have
Yeah.
for their political agenda, right? And so one of the main ways to do that is to make people feel like it's normalizing it, right? Making it feel like, oh, there's 1,000 people right now saying this same thing that I'm afraid to say. Now I don't have to be afraid to say it because I know that these people have my back, right?
That's right. Yep.
Which is a good thing and a bad thing. It's a double-edged sword because on the one hand, a lot of us are out there in the world saying like, gay people should have the same rights as heterosexual people, right? And
Yep.
the more of us say that, the more comfortable everybody is saying that, the more comfortable same-sex people, like same-sex couples are with like living their lives out in the world, right? That's a positive. That's a great thing, right? Like all the LGBTQIA rights, all of that stuff. Like issues of racism, all of that has benefited from us being able to all communicate across the world and say like, hey, like these are shared beliefs amongst all people that everybody should have the same rights.
But then the other side also gets the same.
But then the other side, like because it's a tool, it can be used for good or for evil. It's like the speech in the first Thor movie when Odin gives him the hammer and he's like, it's a hammer, it can be used to build, it can also be used to destroy, right? Like
Yeah.
it's that exact same thing. So it's like we can create these great communities. Case in point, the community that we are presently talking to, right? Or like, I know for a fact that we have some people in our community that are definitely conservative. They are definitely right of center. But I also know that they are good people, that they hold a lot of the same beliefs that we do, and that having these conversations in the way that we have them on a regular basis helps keep them here in a level-headed place, as opposed to spinning off into those other worlds, right?
Yep.
Because Thunderquack is a place where we can reasonably have a discussion where we can say, look, some things about conservative ideologies are fine. Small government, fine. Less government spending, that fine. I don't agree with it necessarily. I think that we need to socialize everything in order for the world to be a better place. I'm working for that Star Trek future, right? Like, I want to get to the Federation of Planets and not, a dystopian thing where everything is privatized,
Yeah.
or like idiocracy. I see as like the opposite end of that, right? That like, but we can have that conversation and it's fine. And it's like even gun rights. Amanda and I had back in season 5 of Arrow, season 5 or season 6, when they did the Spectre of the Gun, I think is the name of the episode. I Where gun rights were like a major talking point in that episode. And then we had our conversation about the episode, and we actually brought on somebody that Amanda is friends with who believes in gun rights, right? And we had that conversation in a very reasonable, safe place,
Wow.
where everybody was cool about it, right? And like, look, was I convinced that people should be able to own AR-15s? No, and I don't think you're going to be able to convince me of that. But we can
And
still
you
have
won't
that
convince the other
conversation.
guy.
Yeah, exactly. Like we didn't dissuade the guest from believing that these things were okay, either, right? Like, but there is a way to have these conversations for everybody to coexist. I think bringing it back to the thing about Disney and something like the Muppet Show, it's like, I think Disney is very much trying to walk that line.
Yeah.
And as I always go back to the quote from Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi says it. He says, uh, I'm not going to quote it directly, because to quote it directly would be to get into tricky,
It-
problematic territory, because quoting Mr. Miyagi directly is a difficult thing in the
yeah.
year 2021. So I'll paraphrase and say the lesson that he teaches Daniel is like, are you gonna learn karate or not? Because before you start, like, you are either committed to this path or you aren't. You either walk the right side of the road or you walk on the left side of the road, because if you walk in the middle of the road, you're gonna get run over by a car. Squish like grape is, I think, exactly what he says, right?
Yeah.
uh, One of the many reasons why Karate Kid is a phenomenal movie and one of my all-time favorites, because it's not just about some kid learning karate and beating up the bullies. It is like, there are sage pieces of Yoda like wisdom in that movie, that I literally live my life by, and that's one of them. So to me, it's like, I don't think that you can walk in the middle of the road without getting run over. I think Disney can afford to get run over. I think that they,
Yeah.
I much like we learn in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, they'll just stand up and just put their thumb in their mouth and blow really hard and reinflate themselves. But I think for the majority of us, walking in the middle of the road is not a good idea. I But that's not to say, like, that's still to further the analogy. You can walk on the left side of the road or you can walk on the right side of the road on the sidewalk, but like, don't go walking off onto the right side of the road so far that you're in the middle of like the ditch, right? With the rats.
Right.
Same goes for the left side of the road. You don't want to fall into the ditch, right? Like, I hope that analogy holds for a lot of people. I guess if you don't live in a place where there are ditches on the side of the road, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I think my point is made, right? It's like there's a reasonable place on the left and a reasonable place on the right. I try and live on that reasonable place on the left, right?
Yeah.
And
Totally.
I try as much as I can to understand conservative politics, because when you stop trying, that's kind of when we're all screwed, right? It was when people don't even try. So I think like what you're talking about with Terry and the Pirates, it's like that, like those people have decided that they're going to stop trying to understand the other side of the argument, and that whatever they choose to believe is truth. I'm going to
Yeah.
go out on a limb. I'm going to make a bit of a crazy statement here.
Uh-oh.
I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the generation that we're a part of is the beginning of our society not really having core moral ideologies. And that's because people are moving away from religion as their core moral ideology. We don't have a structure for it that people, I think, are consciously aware of. This is the thing for me that's really frustrating. Western civilization, certainly Canada and the United States, and a lot of South America, a lot of Europe, is based. Our ideologies are based on Christian fundamentals, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now, are they based on actual teachings of Christ? That's a different thing. Christian fundamentals are different from what's actually in the Bible. And that's a whole other conversation. But our laws, our systems of government, our systems of justice, uh, they are very much built around these ideologies. So I would say that it's almost impossible at this point to get away from that without dismantling those systems. I think that some of those systems do need to be dismantled because they are built on flawed understandings of Christian ideology. But I we have a whole generation, and as I see this getting more and more prominent with every generation. So it's like Gen X kind of has it a little bit, but their parents were still very, very religious and moral in that sense. And so they grew up with media that was teaching them in those ways. They created media that was subversive to that. So the next generation, millennials that came up after that, were a little bit more, I think, savvy to it, but also a little bit like we've been taught not to respect people's religions, which I think is a problem. Because I think everybody has a right to their religion, right? Like that's where I said, like I think that extends as far as it encroaches on human rights. So like if your evangelical Christian belief is that gay people should be eradicated, then like we have a difference of opinion here that goes beyond difference of opinion, because
Right.
you're encroaching on human rights, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think that millennials have not been taught to respect other people's right to freedom of religion, and that's created an extremism of its own where people feel this ridiculous, especially I think Gen Xers who do have a strong religious belief, feel like they have to defend that religious belief violently at times, right? So like and I think that comes out of a lack of respect, but it pushes people into those extremes. It's not an excuse for the behavior, it's just a causation, in my opinion. And I don't have any science to back this up. This is just what I see. But then I see Gen Z coming up after us, and like
Who knows what that's
there's
going to be like?
what I see right now in the like the cusp Gen Z, like the millennial Gen Z cuspers, is just is like not a lack of respect, but just a total disrespect for a lot of things that they consider to be uh, uh, problematic without really understanding them.
Yeah.
And they're teenagers right now, so that'll change over time. And I just tweeted about this today. I think that it's our job as adults to guide them in that. And if we're not doing that, if we're just talking down to them and being derisive and and insulting to them, then we're not going to get very far with this conversation, because they're just going to dismiss us the way that we dismissed adults when we were teenagers that said like your ideas are stupid. So what I said on Twitter and what I'll say here is like, don't be those adults. Be the adult you wish you had in your life when you were 16, right? That like that's going to sit down with you and have a conversation with you and say like, okay, what are your ideas? And like and not just to placate them, but to like really listen, because like they do have good ideas about the way that the world should be and about changing things. They also lack the experience and knowledge to understand that we can't just completely dismantle the economic system overnight. Like that a lot of people would go hungry and there would be a lot of problems in the interim if we did that. It's certainly one solution to the problem. It's not the best way to do it.
Right.
But if we don't have like, again, like to me it all comes down to having open dialogue and respect on both sides of it. um as far as it extends to like that line for me personally, and what I think that line should be, is when it encroaches on human rights. Well, we all agree to be everyone's human rights, which like no one should be persecuted for their sexuality, their gender, their identity, their religion, their political affiliation, unless
Right.
that political affiliation or that religion is specifically centered around taking rights away from other people. That's why we can punch Nazis, but not just Republicans, right? Like, that's where that line is that like the sole purpose of a neo-Nazi party is the extermination of certain types of people. And they'll be like, well, hey, no, we're just talking about, we just want to have a homeland, right? That's ours for white people. And it's like, yeah. But what you're saying is that the land that you currently occupy is that homeland, but you share that land with other people. And also that land didn't belong to you in the first place. So, like your whole argument is inherently flawed. Because what you're saying is that the people who were here first should all be killed. And the people that we forced to come over here and work our land and that we generated wealth off of, they should also be killed unless they leave. Like they can leave, but like it's just, the whole thing is ridiculous. I think we all understand that Nazis are wrong, but everybody
Yep.
listening to this understands that Nazis are wrong. The problem is that we're currently living in a world where a lot of people don't seem to understand that Nazis are wrong and they're bad and they don't deserve a seat at the table. But yeah, anyways, we've talked about a lot of things. We've gone into a lot of territory with this one, but we should probably wrap it up. We could keep going. It's been like an hour and a half.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have an actual like end point or conclusion.
You don't have an
that
answer.
I wanted to
You don't have the
point.
solution.
Yeah, it's just a conversation, right?
Well, geez, Curtis, that was really irresponsible, dude.
Oh man, well, that's what you get for letting me pick the topic.
No, it's good. I mean, like, and I think that a lot of the time when we get into these conversations, Amanda and I are very fond of saying like, we don't have the answers to this.
No.
We're just talking about this. And also like, I reserve the right to turn around in a month and say that I was an idiot for saying any of the stuff that I said on this, because we also need to normalize the idea of like
of change.
It's okay to have a conversation.
Okay to learn.
And then if I welcome, and I know that several of you know this for a fact because you have written me emails or talked to me on Facebook or Twitter or whatever and said like, hey, you guys said XYZ on the last episode. I just want you to know I have a problem with that for these reasons. And you could I I am so grateful that we have listeners that come to us in like a totally respectful and open way and vulnerable way, because I think it's really vulnerable to come up to somebody who you listen to their podcast, which means that, like, to a certain degree, I hope that you respect my opinions in that way, right? Like that you appreciate them. So it's difficult to go up to somebody whose opinions you do admire and say, like, hey, you said a thing that I have a problem with. But I love it. I love that because it's an open dialogue with our listeners, who, like, many of whom are just at this point friends. Um, and that's the way that it should be, in my opinion, is that we have this conversation, and maybe I said some stuff that was wrong, or like I have a skewed opinion of it because of my lived experience, and I'm totally open to hearing what other people have to say, taking
Yep.
that in, and I reserve the right to say that I was an idiot and I was wrong for saying what I said, but we also have to give each other, I think, like to me, the best word for it is grace, like the grace to uh make those mistakes publicly and learn from them and grow from them. And that's one of the things for me of let this stuff exist if it exists, because we have to we have to be forgiving. We have to be able to say, like, hey, we were dumb back then and we're smarter now. We're better as a society, we're better as a people.
Yeah.
Otherwise we just keep making the same mistakes, and we let nationalism sprout back up in our backyard, because that is what has happened. Like, is that a whole generation was not taught the folly of World War II. And when I say that, I mean, that's Gen X and that's millennials. Like, we have not properly been taught what happened and why.
Yeah. And
Certainly
that
in
happens as
America,
we
they haven't.
get further and further away
Yeah.
from all of
But
that.
it's yeah, we got to learn from the past and do a better job in the future. So, but we can't do that by forgetting the past, right? So,
yeah.
uh,
There we go.
that's it.
That's it.
That's as much of a cap on it as you guys are gonna get tonight. Kurtis, thank you so much for being on this episode. Where can people find you? You got to give all
Well,
the plugs.
I have my own podcast called the Epic Marvel Podcast. We talk about Marvel Comics, the old stuff, and not the movies. Sorry to alienate a whole bunch of you guys, but
Well, we have our own podcast now to
that's
talk
true.
about the movies, right? So
Very true. But you can go to epicmarvelpodcast.com and search that up, or you can go to any of your favorite podcast apps like, I don't know, all of them, Stitcher and Spotify and iTunes and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
And also, yeah, all the social media on there. You just gotta search Epic Marvel Podcast. You find it on Google, and then I'll be up there in a number of different places. It's easy to find me.
Figure it out for yourselves, guys.
Yeah, that's right.
No, it's not that hard. Yeah, we I think we did a pretty good job of actually cornering the market on an Epic Marvel
Maximizing
podcast.
Yep.
It's actually look, hey, because Arrow is done and Quiver is done, Epic Marvel Podcast is the biggest podcast on the Thunderquack Podcast Network.
Nice. Hey, I
So,
like that.
yeah. So we must have done something right in terms of the SEO and all of that. I think it's very
so.
simply like it is. It is what it says on the box, which I think is the best part of it. It's like, you know what you're getting.
Yep. I didn't want to be clever or anything like that.
No.
I just wanted it to say exactly what it was going to be.
Exactly what it is on the box. Not like the Thunderquack podcast. What the hell does that mean? But anyways, we kind of fell backwards into the name of this podcast.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you again for being on the podcast. You guys know where to find me, at ArkWolf, ARKWULF on Twitter and Instagram. And with that, thank you guys for listening. And man, Amanda has her sign off, but Amanda's not here. But no, it's you do the pull box sign off. Do you remember it?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I'll just say thank you guys for listening.
Okay.
We'll be back next week. Amanda and I will be back next week to talk about Justice League, the Snyder Cut. So we'll see you then.
And keep reading comics.
Follow the Thunderquack Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook by searching the Thunderquack Podcast. You can support us in 3 ways. First, by heading to the podcast service of your choice and leaving a rating and review. Second, by going to store.thunderquack.com to pick up some merch from your favorite podcasts. And last but not least, by heading to patreon.com/thunderquack to kick in with your monthly pledge of support and get cool rewards like early access and extended episodes. The Thunderquack Podcast is the official podcast of thunderquack.com. Head to thunderquack.com to discover more great podcasts.